am Alberta, 67 years old, and still trying to understand where I went wrong. At my grandson's baby shower, my daughter Jessica raised her glass and said words that shattered my heart. "This is the woman I wish had raised me. She will be the only true grandmother to my child." She was toasting her mother-in-law, not me. No one noticed when I slipped away in tears. But the next morning, a special package arrived at her door. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the thoughtless words of those we love the most. Life can take unexpected turns that break your heart and test your strength. Mine certainly did. Shout at when Richard, my husband of 10 years, died instantly in a head-on collision with a drunk driver. Jessica was only 7 years old, with her father's warm brown eyes and contagious laugh. One day, we were planning a family vacation to Disneyland, and the next, I was planning a funeral and figuring out how to tell our daughter that Daddy was never coming home. The first year was the hardest. Jessica would wake up crying, asking for her father. I would hold her rocking back and forth on her small twin bed, whispering that everything would be okay, even though I wasn't sure myself. During the day, I'd put on a brave face, but at night, after tucking her in, I'd collapse into silent sobs, muffling my cries with a pillow so Jessica wouldn't hear. Financial reality hit hard and fast. Richard had been the primary breadwinner as an architectural engineer, while I worked part-time as a school administrator. His life insurance helped with immediate expenses, but I quickly realized it wouldn't last long in our suburban Chicago neighborhood. I took on a full-time position at the school and picked up weekend shifts at a local bookstore to make ends meet. "Mummy, why do you have to work on Saturdays?" Jessica would ask, her little face scrunched up in disappointment when I couldn't take her to swim lessons or birthday parties. "Because I need to make sure we have everything we need," I would explain, trying to hide my exhaustion. "But we'll have all of Sunday together and we'll make it special." And I tried. Those Sundays became sacred. We'd make pancakes shaped like animals, visit museums when they had free admission days, or simply ride bikes through the neighborhood. I'd set aside money each month for special occasions, her ballet recitals, science fair projects, and birthday parties that I stayed up until midnight preparing. There were beautiful moments, despite our struggles. When Jessica won the 4th grade spelling bee, the pride on her face as she clutched her certificate made all the late nights helping her practice worth it. The summer I taught her to swim at the public pool, her triumphant grin when she finally swam across the deep end without help. The Christmas I worked double shifts for 6 weeks straight to buy her the purple bicycle she'd been dreaming of. But things began to change as Jessica entered her teenage years. She started comparing our life to her friends' more affluent 2-parent households. "Tiffany's getting a new computer for her room," she'd say, or "Madison's family is going to Europe for spring break." I would explain our financial situation as gently as I could, always emphasizing that we were fortunate in other ways. But I saw the disappointment in her eyes. When Jessica turned 16, she became increasingly critical of my parenting. "Mom, you're so overprotective. All the other parents let their kids stay out until midnight. Why can't I go to Sarah's lake house for the weekend? Don't you trust me? You don't understand anything about my life." I tried to be both mother and father, the nurturing supporter and the firm boundary setter. But no matter how I tried, it never seemed enough. I was too strict or too lenient, too involved and not involved enough. The closeness we'd shared during those difficult early years began to fray. Despite our strained relationship, I scrounged and saved for her college fund. I took out a second mortgage on our modest house to ensure she could attend Northwestern University when she was accepted. I would never forget the day we toured the campus together, one of our rare moments of shared excitement. "This is amazing, Mom," she said, looking around the beautiful campus. For that brief moment, I felt like I'd done something right. But once she started college, our communication dwindled. Weekly calls became monthly. Visits home became rare. I told myself this was normal, healthy even. She was finding her independence, building her own life. Still, the house felt emptier than ever. In her junior year, Jessica called with unexpected news. "Mum, I've met someone. His name is Michael Wallace. He's really special." Her voice had a lightness I hadn't heard in years. Over the following months, I heard more about Michael, a business major from a wealthy family in Lake Forest, one of Chicago's most affluent suburbs. Jessica began spending holidays with his family instead of coming home. When she finally brought him to meet me, I could see why she was smitten. Michael was handsome, polite, and clearly adored my daughter. But there was something in the way Jessica watched for his approval, the way she seemed to be performing for him, that unsettled me. 6 months later, she called again, her voice bubbling with excitement. Michael proposed. "We're getting married after graduation." My heart swelled with happiness for her, but also ached with the realizations that our little family of two was officially ending. The next phase would begin with meeting Michael's parents, the Wallaces, who Jessica had described as practically perfect in every way. Little did I know that this introduction would mark the beginning of my daughter slipping away from me completely. The first meeting with the Wallaces was scheduled at their Lake Forest estate, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a view of Lake Michigan that took my breath away. I spent hours choosing the right outfit, settling on a navy blue dress I'd purchased on sale at Macy's and my one pair of good shoes. I brought a homemade apple pie, Richard's mother's recipe that Jessica had always loved. From the moment Vivian Wallace opened the door, I felt outclassed. She was tall and slender with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and the kind of polished appearance that comes from regular spa treatments and designer clothing. Her husband George was equally impressive in a casual yet obviously expensive golf outfit. "Alberta, we've heard so much about you," Vivian said, air-kissing my cheeks. "Please come in. We're so delighted to finally meet Jessica's mother." The inside of their home was like something from a magazine. Pristine white furniture, original artwork on the walls, and fresh flower arrangements on every surface. I noticed Jessica watching me closely as if gauging my reaction to this display of wealth. "Your home is beautiful," I said sincerely, handing Vivian my pie. "Oh, how quaint," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We usually have our desserts catered from Bellefleur Patisserie, but this will be a charming addition." My pie was never served that evening. Instead, we had individual chocolate soufflés that Vivian mentioned she'd learned to make during a culinary course in Paris. Throughout dinner, the conversation revolved around the Wallaces' social connections, their country club membership, and Michael's promising future in his father's investment firm. When asked about myself, I briefly mentioned my work in school administration. "How admirable," Vivian commented. "It must have been challenging raising Jessica on your own while working full-time." "We managed," I replied, simply not wanting to detail our financial struggles at this elegant table. "Mum worked 2 jobs most of my childhood," Jessica interjected, and I initially felt a surge of pride that she was acknowledging my efforts. But then she continued, "That's why I practically raised myself after Dad died. I had to learn to be independent early on." The comment stung. Yes, I'd worked long hours, but I'd structured my schedule to be present for every important moment in her life. I'd never missed a parent-teacher conference, a dance recital, or a school play. "Jessica was always remarkably self-sufficient," I said, trying to mask my hurt. "But we had our special times together too." "Well, independence is a valuable trait," George offered. "Though nothing compares to the guidance of present parents. Vivian was always home when Michael and his sister returned from school. Family dinners were non-negotiable in our household." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. That sounds wonderful. We usually just had whatever Mum could throw together between jobs. Sometimes I ate alone while she was working evening shifts. Each comment felt like a small betrayal, rewriting our history to make my sacrifices seem like neglect. By the end of the evening, I felt diminished, as if all my years of dedicated parenting had been reduced to a cautionary tale. As our visits with the Wallaces became more frequent, Jessica began comparing me to Vivian more openly. Vivian makes her pie crust with imported butter, she'd say after I baked. Or, Vivian says that colour doesn't really flatter your complexion. She began adopting Vivian's mannerisms, the way she held her wine glass, her pronunciation of certain words, even her dismissive hand gesture when disagreeing with something. It was as if Jessica was methodically replacing her own personality with a version she thought would better fit into the Wallace family. Wedding planning became another arena for comparison. When I offered to help sew the table runners for the reception, Jessica hesitated. That's sweet, Mum, but Vivian already has a relationship with a premier event designer. Everything needs to coordinate perfectly. I was allowed to help with addressing invitations, but even then, Jessica scrutinized my handwriting, suggesting that perhaps Vivian's calligrapher friend should handle the important ones for consistency. The wedding itself was an extravagant affair at the Chicago Botanical Gardens, with 400 guests, most of whom I'd never met. During the reception, I was seated at a table far from the wedding party, while Vivian sat prominently beside Jessica. When it came time for toasts, George and Vivian both gave lengthy speeches about welcoming Jessica into their family. When my turn came, Jessica whispered, "Keep it brief, Mum. The band is waiting to start." After the wedding, Jessica and Michael moved into a starter home, just minutes from his parents, nearly an hour's drive from me. Our already infrequent visits became even rarer, always with an excuse about their busy schedules or social obligations with the Wallaces. "We had dinner at Vivian and George's last night," Jessica would mention during our short phone calls. "Vivian taught me how to make her famous coq au vin. She says anyone can learn to be a good cook with the right guidance." The implication was clear: the things I hadn't taught her, Vivian would. My daughter was choosing a new mother figure, and I was expected to quietly step aside. I refused to surrender our relationship without a fight. I called Jessica regularly, though our conversations grew increasingly superficial. I sent thoughtful gifts for holidays and special occasions. When those went unacknowledged, I tried changing my approach. I enrolled in cooking classes at the community center, hoping to impress Jessica with new culinary skills. I redecorated my modest living room, replacing the worn furniture Richard and I had purchased decades ago with more contemporary pieces I could barely afford. I even hired a personal shopper at Nordstrom to help update my wardrobe, spending almost a month's salary on clothes I hoped would meet with Jessica's approval. None of it seemed to make a difference. Jessica would cancel our lunch dates at the last minute because something came up with Vivian. My calls increasingly went to voicemail. The new recipes I excitedly shared were met with polite disinterest or unfavorable comparisons to Vivian's versions. "That sounds nice, Mum, but Vivian makes hers with saffron imported from Spain." I felt like a contestant in a competition where the rules kept changing, and I was the only one who didn't know I was being judged. Then came the phone call that should have brought us closer. "Mum," Jessica's voice trembled with excitement. "I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." For a moment, pure joy overshadowed all the hurt of the past few years. A grandchild. A new beginning, perhaps, for our strained relationship. "Oh, Jessica, that's wonderful news. I'm so happy for you and Michael. How are you feeling? Is there anything I can do to help?" "I'm good. Just a little morning sickness. Vivian's been amazing. She comes over every morning with ginger tea and these special crackers she orders from some bakery in New York. She's already planning the nursery. You should see her Pinterest board." And just like that, the familiar sting returned. Once again, Vivian had claimed the primary supporting role in my daughter's life. Still, I persisted. I bought books on modern grandparenting. I researched the safest cribs and car seats. I even began knitting a baby blanket, spending hours each evening working on the intricate pattern. I'd love to help with the nursery, I offered during one of our rare phone conversations. Maybe I could come over next weekend and we could look at paint colours. Oh, that's sweet, Mum. But Vivian's already hired a designer. The theme is woodland creatures with a Scandinavian aesthetic. It's going to be featured in Chicago Home magazine. When I suggested hosting a small baby shower for Jessica's childhood friends, she hesitated. Actually, Vivian is already planning the shower. It's going to be at the Lake Forest Country Club. But you're invited, of course. I'll have her send you an invitation. I swallowed my disappointment. That sounds lovely. I'd still like to contribute something. Maybe you could help with the favor bags, Jessica offered. But I could hear in her voice that this was a consolation prize. The final blow came when Jessica called to share the baby's name. If it's a boy, we're thinking William George after Michael's grandfather and father. And if it's a girl, Eleanor Vivian after Michael's grandmother and mother. Isn't that perfect? There was no mention of honouring Richard or any connection to our side of the family. When I gently pointed this out, Jessica sounded annoyed. Mum, these names have been in Michael's family for generations. It's important to them. Plus, Eleanor and William are both classic names that will serve the baby well professionally. As if the name Richard or Alberta would somehow hinder my grandchild's future success. Each slight accumulated like small stones in my pocket, weighing me down with hurt and rejection. Still, I reminded myself that this was Jessica's life, her family. Perhaps once the baby arrived, things would change. Perhaps becoming a mother herself would help her understand and appreciate the sacrifices I had made. With this hope in mind, I accepted the formal invitation to the baby shower at the Lake Forest Country Club, determined to support my daughter despite the growing distance between us. The Lake Forest Country Club was intimidating from the moment I pulled my 10-year-old Honda into the circular drive flanked by luxury vehicles. A valet looked skeptically at my car before reluctantly taking my keys, and I smoothed my department store dress as I approached the entrance. Inside the clubhouse had been transformed into a botanical garden paradise. Fresh flowers cascaded from crystal vases, delicate butterfly decorations hung from gossamer ribbons, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. A hand-lettered sign read, "Welcome to Jessica's Butterfly Garden Baby Shower." I clutched my gift, the hand-knit blanket I'd spent months creating wrapped in simple blue paper, and searched for my daughter among the crowd of well-dressed women. Jessica looked radiant in a pale pink maternity dress that perfectly showcased her 6-month baby bump. She was surrounded by a group of women I didn't recognize, with Vivian at her side, in a coordinating outfit that made them look like mother and daughter. "Mum!" "You made it," Jessica called when she spotted me waving me over. Her smile seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt a surge of hope. Vivian greeted me with her usual air kisses. "Alberta, so glad you could join us. Jessica was just telling everyone about the nursery mural. The artist flew in from Paris last week." "It's stunning," Jessica gushed. "Wait until you see the photographs." I nodded politely, though this was the first I'd heard about any mural. "The room looks beautiful," I said, gesturing to the elaborate decorations. "You've done an amazing job, Vivian." "Oh, it was nothing," she replied with a dismissive wave. "Just a little something to welcome our first grandchild properly." Our first grandchild. Not my first grandchild, but ours, as if Vivian and I shared equal standing. Throughout the luncheon, I sat at a table with distant acquaintances of the Wallaces, none of whom seemed particularly interested in getting to know Jessica's mother. I watched as Jessica moved from table to table, laughing and chatting her hand, often resting on Vivian's arm as they shared private jokes. When it came time for gifts, Vivian had arranged an elaborate display area where each present would be opened and showcased. Jessica oohed and ahed over monogrammed baby clothes, hand-carved wooden toys, and a silver baby rattle that had apparently been in the Wallace family for generations. When she unwrapped my blanket, her reaction was politely appreciative, but noticeably cooler than her response to the designer gifts. "Oh, a homemade blanket. That's thoughtful, Mum. Thank you." "I knitted it myself." I explained, my voice wavering slightly. "The pattern is called Love Without End." I thought it was appropriate. Jessica nodded and quickly moved on to the next gift, a state-of-the-art baby monitor system from Vivian and George. "This is exactly what we needed," she exclaimed, hugging Vivian tightly. "You always know the perfect thing." The most lavish gift was saved for last, a custom-designed rosewood crib that Vivian announced would become a family heirloom for generations of Wallace children. After the gifts had been displayed, Vivian tapped her crystal champagne flute filled with sparkling cider in solidarity with Jessica and called for everyone's attention. "Before we enjoy our dessert, I believe Jessica would like to say a few words." Jessica stood gracefully, one hand cradling her baby bump. "I just want to thank everyone for coming today and for all your generous gifts. This baby is already so loved, and Michael and I are incredibly grateful." She paused, her eyes filling with tears as she turned toward Vivian. "But I especially want to thank Vivian, not just for this beautiful shower, but for everything she's done for me since I became part of the Wallace family." My heart quickened as Jessica continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Vivian has taught me what it means to create a true home. She's shown me the kind of mother I want to be, in so many ways." She took a deep breath. "This is the woman I wish had raised me. She will be the one and only true grandmother to my child." The room erupted in applause, but I couldn't hear it over the roaring in my ears. One and only true grandmother. The words echoed in my mind like a death knell to my relationship with my future grandchild and with my daughter. I looked around the room, wondering if anyone else had registered the cruelty of Jessica's words, but the other guests were smiling and nodding. Only a few glanced my way with expressions of awkward pity. I couldn't breathe. The beautiful room with its flowers and butterflies suddenly felt suffocating. As unobtrusively as possible, I gathered my purse and slipped out of the side door while everyone's attention remained on Jessica and Vivian, embracing at the front of the room. No one called out. No one tried to stop me. No one even noticed I was gone. The drive home passed in a blur of tears. Decades of sacrifices of love, of doing everything in my power to give Jessica a good life, all dismissed in a single thoughtless declaration. I had been erased, replaced, deemed inadequate, not just as a mother, but now as a grandmother too. At home, I collapsed onto my couch, still in my carefully chosen outfit, and let the sobs rack my body. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made each breath a struggle. I had lost my husband, and now it seemed I had lost my only child as well. As midnight approached, my tears finally subsided, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. This couldn't continue. I would not silently accept being written out of my daughter's and grandchild's lives. There was one thing Jessica had never truly seen: the reality of our life together, the struggles and triumphs that had shaped us both. It was time she remembered the truth. I woke early after a fitful night's sleep, my resolve strengthened rather than diminished in the cold light of morning. I made a cup of strong coffee and walked purposefully to the spare bedroom closet, where I kept our family's most precious memories. The storage boxes were meticulously labeled: Jessica birth to age 5, elementary school years, middle school, high school, and so on. I hadn't looked through them in years, the memories too bittersweet after Jessica's gradual rejection. Now I pulled them out one by one, searching for specific items that would tell our true story. From the first box, I retrieved Jessica's baby book, where I documented her first smile, first steps, first words. Inside were Polaroid photos of me holding her through nights of colic, my exhausted smile belying the fact I'd been awake for 36 hours straight. There was the lock of hair from her first haircut, carefully preserved in a tiny envelope. The elementary school box yielded report cards with teachers' comments about Jessica's exceptional support at home, despite our challenging circumstances. There were handmade Mother's Day cards with crayon declarations, "To the best mom in the whole wide world," and "I love you to the moon and back." I found the calendar, where I'd meticulously noted every school event, doctor's appointment, and play date, with coloured highlights indicating which days I'd switched shifts or called in favours to ensure I could attend. Next to it were the programme booklets from every school play and concert, some with pressed flowers I'd given Jessica after her performances. The middle school box contained something even more valuable: the journal I'd kept during those years, documenting my fears and hopes as Jessica navigated adolescence. Entries detailed late nights, helping with science projects, weekends spent driving her and friends to mall outings I couldn't afford, but prioritized for her social development and the 3 jobs I briefly juggled. When Jessica needed emergency dental surgery, our insurance wouldn't fully cover. I found the high school graduation program where Jessica had been awarded a scholarship I'd secretly applied for on her behalf, spending nights researching opportunities and helping craft her personal statement while she slept. In the college box were the loan documents showing how I'd remortgaged our house to cover what her scholarships didn't. There were phone records showing our daily calls during her freshman year before she met Michael, and our conversations dwindled. Most poignantly, I found Richard's last letter to me, written just days before his death, where he'd expressed his love and admiration for how I was raising our daughter. "Jessica is lucky to have you as her mother," he'd written. "Your strength and love will shape her into an extraordinary woman." From my bedroom, I retrieved my own most treasured possession, the small jewelry box containing my wedding ring and Richard's, which I'd kept after his funeral. These tangible connections to our little family seemed especially precious now. Finally, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote Jessica a letter of my own. I didn't lash out or list grievances. Instead, I wrote about love, the fierce, unending love I'd felt from the moment I knew she existed. I wrote about choices, how every decision I'd made, from working multiple jobs to forgoing relationships that might have complicated her life, had been with her well-being as my guiding star. I wrote about my failings too, times I'd been too tired to play occasions when bills took priority over new toys, moments when my patience had frayed. I acknowledged that I had been an imperfect mother, as all mothers are, but never an unloving one. I finished with a simple truth: I have only ever wanted your happiness, Jessica. If Vivian brings you joy and comfort, then I am grateful for her presence in your life. But please don't rewrite our history to justify your present. We struggled, yes, but we loved fiercely. That has always been our truth. I carefully packed everything into a sturdy box: the baby book, school mementos, financial records, photographs, journals, and Richard's letter. On top, I placed my own letter and the jewelry box containing our wedding rings. By 9 o'clock, I had arranged for same-day delivery to Jessica's address. The package would arrive by noon, while Jessica was likely still basking in the afterglow of her successful shower. As I watched the delivery truck pull away, I felt a surprising sense of peace. Whatever happened next was beyond my control. I had spoken my truth in the most eloquent way I knew, through the artifacts of our shared life and love. The rest was up to Jessica. Jessica was arranging the baby shower gifts in the newly decorated nursery when the doorbell rang that morning. Expecting another delivery of shower presents, she was surprised to find a courier with a simple brown box requiring her signature. Her initial confusion at the unmarked package turned to recognition when she saw my handwriting on the enclosed letter. She later told me she almost set the whole box aside, still flush with the success of her shower and irritated at what she assumed would be a guilt trip from her oversensitive mother. Something, perhaps the unusual weight of the package, or a flicker of remorse for her public declaration, prompted her to open it anyway. She started with my letter, reading it twice, before setting it aside with hands that had begun to tremble slightly. Then she opened the baby book, turning pages slowly, as she rediscovered moments she'd long forgotten, the detailed notes about her first words, the tiny footprints, the photographs of a much younger me, gazing at her with undisguised adoration. The school mementos came next. Jessica found herself lingering over a particular photo from her fourth-grade play. She'd been cast as the lead in Charlotte's Web, and the picture showed her in full costume beaming as I knelt beside her, both of us grinning despite the dark circles under my eyes. She remembered now what she'd forgotten. I had worked a double shift, rushed to the school without time to change from my uniform, and still managed to bring a bouquet of daisies, her favorite flowers. She examined the old calendars, noting for the first time how I'd arranged my work schedule around her activities, often with notations like "switch with Karen" or "ask Mum to cover" scribbled next to her events. She found a paycheck stub, paperclipped to the program from her dance recital, the dates making it clear I had worked overtime for weeks to afford the custom costume she'd insisted she needed. The loan documents for her college education revealed sacrifices she'd never fully understood. I had taken on debt that would follow me into retirement, all to ensure she received the education that had ultimately led her to Michael and her new life. When Jessica discovered the journal entries, her composure finally broke. Through my written words, she relived our life from my perspective. The bone-deep exhaustion, the constant financial worry, the loneliness of single parenthood, but also the overwhelming love and pride that had made it all worthwhile. One entry particularly struck her. Jessica asked again today why we can't live in a bigger house like her friend Madison. I couldn't explain that the second job I took to pay for her ballet lessons means we can't afford to move. I just held her and promised that someday things would be better. The truth is, I'd live in a cardboard box if it meant seeing her dance with that joy on her face. Her happiness is worth every sacrifice. By the time Jessica reached Richard's letter, she was sobbing openly. Her father's words, preserved all these years, spoke of his pride in the mother I had become, and his confidence in the woman Jessica would grow to be, under Alberta's loving guidance. The wedding rings were the final breaking point. She held the simple gold bands that symbolized the love that had created her, the family that had been broken by tragedy, but sustained by devotion. Jessica later told me she spent hours with the contents of that box, scattered around her, weeping as she pieced together the reality she had so casually dismissed. The stark contrast between her accusations and the documented truth of our life together became impossible to ignore. As afternoon turned to evening, Jessica made a decision. Leaving the baby shower gifts still half arranged, she got in her car and drove the 45 minutes to my house, the first such spontaneous visit in years. When I opened the door to find my daughter on the porch, her face tear-streaked and her pregnant belly preceding her, I momentarily feared something was wrong with the baby. "Jessica, is everything all right?" "No, Mum," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Nothing's all right. Can I come in?" "Please, we need to talk." I stepped aside to let her enter my heart, pounding with both hope and fear. We sat on the couch where I had sobbed just the night before, But now it was Jessica who could barely speak through her tears. "I am so sorry," she finally managed. "I don't even know where to begin." We talked for hours that evening, really talked for the first time in years. Jessica spoke first, her words tumbling out between sobs. "I was so cruel to you yesterday. The things I said. I don't know how you can ever forgive me." "I love you," I said simply. "That hasn't changed no matter what." She shook her head in disbelief. "How can you say that after what I did? After I publicly humiliated you and tried to replace you with Vivian?" "Because I'm your mother," I replied. "That's a bond that can bend but never break, at least not from my side." Jessica wiped her eyes. "I didn't realize how much I'd romanticized the Wallaces until I saw everything you'd kept. Their perfect life seemed so much better than our struggles. Vivian always looks immaculate. Their house is straight out of a magazine, and they make everything look so easy." "Appearances can be deceiving," I said gently. "What you see now is the result of generational wealth and privilege. You're comparing their finish line to our journey." "It was more than that," Jessica admitted. "I think part of me was angry at our circumstances growing up. I blamed you for Dad's death, for our financial struggles, for everything that felt unfair. It was easier than accepting that life is sometimes just cruel and random." This candid admission hurt, but I appreciated her honesty. "I understand. I sometimes blamed myself too. I wondered if I could have done more, been more." "But you did everything," Jessica said, gesturing to the box of memories she'd brought back with her. "You worked yourself to exhaustion. You gave up your own dreams. You were always there for the important moments, even when it meant taking on extra shifts later." She picked up a photo of us at her high school graduation. "I remember this day. You bought me that white dress I wanted, even though it was way too expensive. I never knew you took an extra cleaning job to pay for it." "You didn't need to know," I said. "That was my job as your mother, to carry the worries so you didn't have to." Jessica's hand moved to her baby bump. "I'm going to be a mother soon, and I'm terrified. Vivian makes motherhood look like a glossy magazine spread, everything coordinated and perfect. But that's not real, is it?" I shook my head. "Real motherhood is messy and exhausting and sometimes heartbreaking. It's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done." "Even when your child turns out to be an ungrateful brat who publicly rejects you?" Jessica asked with a watery smile. "Even then," I assured her, reaching for her hand. "Though I won't pretend it didn't hurt." "I got caught up in the Wallace world," Jessica confessed. "Their approval felt like validation somehow. And Vivian, she can be very controlling under that perfect exterior. She has opinions about everything, how Michael and I should live, how we should parent, even what we should name our baby." This revelation didn't surprise me. I had sensed Vivian's controlling nature beneath her polished veneer. "The truth is," Jessica continued hesitantly, "their family isn't as perfect as it seems. Michael's sister barely speaks to them. She moved to Oregon years ago to escape Vivian's constant criticism. And George and Vivian sleep in separate bedrooms now. Michael says they haven't really loved each other in years, but they maintain the image of the perfect family." I felt a rush of sympathy for the Wallaces despite everything. Perfect facades often hide complicated realities. "I was so desperate to belong in their world that I was willing to rewrite our history," Jessica admitted. "But seeing all those mementos, reading your journal, Mum, I had no idea how much you sacrificed. How could I have forgotten?" "You were a child," I said gently. "Children aren't supposed to carry the weight of adult concerns. I wanted you to feel secure and loved, not burdened by our circumstances." Jessica's eyes filled with fresh tears. "But to say Vivian would be the only true grandmother to my baby, I can't believe those words came out of my mouth. I was trying so hard to please her, to be the daughter she wanted. And what about the daughter you want to be? I asked softly. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. I want to be a daughter who honors the truth of her history, who recognizes real love and sacrifice, who doesn't throw away a lifetime of devotion for surface-level approval. She met my eyes directly. I want to be your daughter again, Mum, if you'll have me. I opened my arms, and Jessica fell into them like she had as a little girl. We held each other, both crying, now years of misunderstandings and hurt beginning to heal with each shared tear. I want my child to know the grandmother who knows what real love looks like, Jessica whispered against my shoulder. The one who understands that sacrifice and showing up are more important than appearances. We talked until well past midnight, making plans to rebuild our relationship. Jessica asked me to help design a corner of the nursery, something meaningful, not just photogenic. She suggested we start a weekly lunch tradition that would continue after the baby arrived. Most significantly, she asked if I would be in the delivery room when the time came. I need your strength, she said simply. I always have. Before she left, Jessica made one more revelation. We've decided to change the baby's name. If it's a boy, he'll still be William, but his middle name will be Richard after Dad. And if it's a girl, she smiled tentatively. What would you think of Eleanor Alberta? So she carries a piece of both her grandmothers. The gesture meant everything. Acknowledgement, inclusion, honor. I could only nod through fresh tears. As I walked Jessica to her car, she turned to me with newfound wisdom in her eyes. The Wallaces gave me a glimpse of what financial security looks like, and that's valuable. But you taught me what unconditional love feels like, and that's priceless. I'm sorry I confused the two. 2 weeks later, we had another first, a dinner with both families together. Vivian was initially cool toward me, clearly confused by Jessica's sudden reconnection with her mother. But as the evening progressed and Jessica shared some of our newly rediscovered family stories, something shifted. Your mother is quite remarkable, Jessica, Vivian said later with what seemed like genuine respect. Raising you alone, working multiple jobs. That takes extraordinary strength. I know, Bill, Jessica replied, squeezing my hand. I come from a long line of strong women. My child is lucky to have two such different but equally loving grandmothers. The following month, Jessica gave birth to Eleanor Alberta Wallace, a healthy 7-pound baby girl with Richard's warm brown eyes. As promised, I was there in the delivery room holding Jessica's hand through each contraction, witnessing the miracle of my granddaughter's arrival into the world. Vivian was the first visitor afterward, bringing an extravagant arrangement of pink roses. To my surprise, she'd also brought a small gift for me, a grandmother's journal similar to her own. I thought we could both document our experiences with Eleanor, she explained somewhat stiffly. Different perspectives for her to treasure someday. It was an olive branch of sorts, an acknowledgement that there was room for both of us in Eleanor's life. I accepted it gratefully. Over the following months, an unexpected dynamic emerged. Vivian excelled at organizing professional photos and planning elaborate baby milestone celebrations. I became the grandmother Jessica called at 2 a.m. when Eleanor was feverish, the one who could calm the colicky baby with the same rocking motion that had once soothed Jessica. You both give her something invaluable, Jessica observed one afternoon as we watched Vivian arrange Eleanor in a picture-perfect pose while I waited with a burp cloth for the inevitable spit-up. She'll grow up knowing she's both adored and truly seen. The journey to this new equilibrium wasn't always smooth. There were occasional tensions between Vivian and me, old hurts that resurfaced in Jessica from time to time, moments of uncertainty about our reforged bonds. But we were committed to moving forward with honesty and grace. What I've learned through this painful journey is that love isn't about perfection or appearances. It's about showing up day after day through the messiness and the beauty alike. It's about forgiveness. When wounds are inflicted, courage to speak truth when necessary, and the wisdom to recognize that most family stories contain both heartbreak and healing. Have you ever experienced a moment when painful honesty led to deeper understanding in your family? Has a relationship you thought was broken been repaired in ways you never expected? Please share your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of family journeys. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to be reminded that it's never too late for reconciliation. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, the bonds of true family love can bend almost to breaking, but with courage and forgiveness, they can become stronger at the mended places.